The fundamental paradox at the bottom is that protecting secrecy actually increases the sharing of information. It's an interesting thing. But if you think about business relationships, of course, you have to have security in which to communicate very sensitive information. So whether it's within the employment relationship or the relationship between an enterprise and subcontractors or within global value chains, they all need to pass sensitive information to make the relationship work. And for that purpose, we need to give some protection to that sensitive information and respect the parameters of the relationship so that it can't be used outside the relationship for extraneous purposes. So it's an essential element of business relations. And it provides also an incentive for innovation of an incremental nature. You know, all of the information that you get after patenting, for example, the experience of a patenting, or business information, which is not technical. So there are several, I think, very, very good reasons why we need to give protection to trade secrets. So it's really a relational right, you know. You don't have any absolute property right to information in a trade secret. You have a right to protect the information that you have, which is confidential, against certain forms of predatory activity. So those forms of predatory activity can range from, for example, espionage, cyber intrusions, the theft of information from one enterprise by some unconnected party, to abuses of a relationship, for example, an employee running off with the crown jewels and going to a competitor. That happens, unfortunately, from time to time. So it's a relative right that you have against certain forms of conduct in relation to the information that are deemed to be unsatisfactory and to impede actually fair practices in the marketplace. It's a defensive right against predatory and unfair commercial practices that make the business environment unsafe for the sharing of information that's necessary to make the whole thing work. In the digital economy, we express everything in data, and all sorts of relationships are expressed in data. That means that we store a lot more value in data, and that value is vulnerable, and is vulnerable because our digital protection systems, the physical, as it were, systems, or the cyber systems, are imperfect. And we see almost on a daily basis incidences of cyber intrusion of one sort or another. So I think it's also an extremely important right to ensure that our cyber world functions properly. If we're going to store things in cyber systems, we need to know that there is a legal protection against unfair intrusion or the theft of the data or information. The time is probably ripe to look at what international action might be appropriate. Now, it's also a difficult time for taking international action in the normative area. We all know that that there are approaches that are adopted by major countries which do not favour multilateral rulemaking. Nevertheless, here I think we see that there is a genuine interest on the part of the business community. I think it extends to a whole range of social organisations or non-governmental organisations. I think of non-governmental organisation acting in sensitive areas, let's say health areas. They don't want their information exposed outside the trusted relationships that they have put in place for the sharing of information. I think we need member states' involvement here, of course, because they're the ones that have to drive this. So I would hope that member states through their stakeholders, see the value in being able to explore, at any rate, whether it's possible to come up with a set of principles which are more detailed than anything we have in existing international instruments at the moment. Now, whether that then goes on to form the basis of a hard normative instrument or it remains soft guiding principles, we're at too early a stage to be able to predict. I personally would favour very much that we go forward to see whether we can find common ground on a number of principles which give the world a better basis in which to establish relationships in and around information which is confidential in nature. There's always, in and around innovations, a lot of sensitive information which constitute trade secrets. So it's very much part of the mainstream of intellectual property. Absolutely, it's part of what we call intellectual property, and its principal application, let's say, is commercially sensitive technical information generated. The typical patent license is not a patent license, it's a patent and know-how license, or a patent and trade secret license. And then there are practical measures. For example, I think many of the disputes that arise in relation to trade secrets really concern facts. Who did they possess the information? When did they possess it? Was it confidential? Did the others possess it legitimately? And we are starting a service in March next year. We're calling it WIPO Proof. It's a digital time stamping service, rather like a digital notary, which will give you an indelible proof of the existence of data at a certain time deposited by a certain person. So it's not a complete set of actions for the protection of trade secrecy, but it very much aids in providing a good evidentiary basis for the existence of trade secrets.